This is the table saw and the vacuum cleaner associated. I just want to talk about the safety. So the very first thing you should worry about is the dangers left by the last person. For example, the last person left a steel rule and a square on here, and clearly you don't want those going into the saw. You equally don't know a whole load of other things. So let's just go through the things that you can see on here. We've got the on-off switch. We've got a little red pusher for the wood. We've got a knob here, which if you rotate it, raises and lowers the blade. And if you undo that lock and push the knob in, you can rotate the blade to give yourself different angles. On the top, you have the extraction cover here and hidden underneath the blade, and you have the guide. So talking about the safety, we've talked about the last person. Did the last person destroy the blade? Looking carefully, I think, no, that's fine. Did the last person damage anything or leave any mess around? No, but just looking at this vacuum cleaner, for example, you'll notice it's got a kink in it. And if you allow that kink to action during the process, the vacuum element will not work and we'll end up with dirt. And while we're down here, there are also some separate blades for the person who wants to do different sort of things. So just be aware there are other bits of kit sitting around on this machine. So the next thing you need to think about is yourself. Are your clothes tight to your body, or are they dangly? Are they likely to catch in that blade? Because I promise you, having your hand drawn into that blade is not a nice experience. So we don't want you to do anything like that. The blade looks good, so I think we can honestly say that's not going to give us any real danger. The next thing to think about is a thing called kickback. Now, kickback shouldn't happen on this saw. However, if it does happen, you suddenly get a piece of wood flying out of it, and it occurs when the guide, which you might be using, is angled so that this end is closer to the blade than this end. And in this present state, that can't happen. However, as the machine wears, that is a possibility. So the two things I always check after I've picked up this machine for the first time, after a visitor's been on it, and I just check the distance between it being placed anywhere and the blade. Wind it up. Take the steel rule, place it against the blade there, which is measuring 44 mil, and against this end, and it's measuring 44 mil. So kickback should not be an issue, but if this had become a bit worn, as you can see, you can flex it, you may end up in a position of danger. So just be aware of that. And while we're here, I'm just going to check the blade is square to the table. If you look closely, you should see no light getting through there. So the blade is tabled clearly. If there's a danger of kickback, you don't want to be standing here, because the piece of wood will fly back into your face. It'd be more sensible to be standing over here, so any piece of wood that comes out flies that way and away from you. You also need to think about dust. This machine generates a lot of dust. I have found dust everywhere in this room, and it's nearly all come from this saw. So whatever happens, try and use the extractor. There's no reason why you shouldn't. It plugs in back here where that white space is. You grab the saw, you pull it out, you take the nozzle of the extractor and you stick it in the white hole. If you've got the yellow extractor, you will need a guide, which is one of these things, which allows you to take the larger orifice of the vacuum cleaner and stick it into a smaller hole of the saw. You also find people around you kind of don't like the dust everywhere. because it's a pain. It gets everywhere and it makes things dirty. Moving on, space. There is no point in trying to cut a long piece of wood like this in this position, because you're going to run into the wall. So if you're using a long piece of wood, pull this out into the space. Perfectly easy to do. It's a very light machine. Finally, noise. This thing makes a lot of noise. You as the operator need to wear these on your head, but you also have to think about anybody else around you. So close the door to keep the dust and the noise from there, and tell everybody else you're about to make a lot of noise. You also need eye protection, both from the dust, from the splinters, and from every other aspect of this environment. And they come from here, this box. It says gloves, eye protection, face mask. Use the goggles, they're important. Okay. So, you now want to make a cut. Let's take my piece of wood as an example. If I wanted to cut that, there is no point in operating a guide saw like that. You want the blade so it is just sticking out of the wood. So we wind it down. Wind it down until the blade is only just sticking above, like that. Notice I'm trying, and I've discovered it's just touching the extractor, so it wants to go up ever so slightly, like that. The other thing you need to think about is this pocket, because if I run my finger along this edge, the plastic part is about 1 millimeter below the steel part. So if I'm pushing, I will hit a little edge there. So be aware, just got to think about some of those things. Now, the other thing you need to think about is distance. Now, we've got built into here a measuring device. And it's set so that it can even go to some element of magnification. But I wouldn't trust that. I would always measure it. So I use my steel rule then against the face and measure my distance. And even then I might use a piece of scrap wood just to check the length is what I want it to be. Now, we're in that position where fundamentally we've done the fundamental settings. So let's talk about what you do next. And the next thing is power. What I do with power is I plug the vacuum cleaner and the saw into the same socket. Now, I promise you very quickly, you will forget which of those is the vacuum cleaner and which of those is the saw. So every time you want to do anything, make sure they're turned off. They're both turned off. When you want to do something, turn them both on. It's good practice, it keeps you safe and it keeps you sensible. So follow that practice. I think we're at a position where we could cut. Once you've finished with the unit, the important thing is to clean everything down. You will be surprised where the dust has all gone. So disconnect the vacuum cleaner, vacuum all over the table, vacuum all over the table legs, all over the surfaces. As you begin to get a clean surface on the floor, vacuum the soles of your feet. You'll find that they very quickly pick up dust and you don't want to be taking that through into the clean room. Replace all the tools, push the unit back against the wall so it's out of the way for other people, tidy up the cables, check the blade that you haven't damaged it. Often best just to have a good look and rub your fingers across it. Is it still reasonably sharp, no pick up? Stand back and have a little think. Is there anything else I need to do to make the place tidy? Oh, and you also need to think through any procedures that we have here. So the ones that this machine comes under for Makerspace are the noise procedure, the lone working procedure, and of course at the moment, the COVID procedure.